Welcome back to the Bet on Her podcast. Our next guest represented the U.S. Indoor national volleyball team for 11 years. You're a two-time Olympian and two-time silver medalist. And you're also a two-time national champion at USC. Welcome, Nicole Davis.
Thanks.
Yeah. Great having you.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
And another thing to add too, though, is Nicole, you work with Compete to Create, correct? And that's with Dr. Michael Gervais and Pete Carroll are the co-founders.
That's correct. Yeah, they are the co-founders. Pete's kind of stepped away from it, so we're now under Dr. Mike's Finding Mastery brand. He also has a podcast, Finding Mastery, shameless plug.
It's a great podcast too.
We listen to it.
Yes, religiously.
Company.
How I always was curious to know, because I feel like Dr. Gervais is this, one of the best sports psychs, and you're going to school right now, finishing your doctorate, having your master's in psychology and all that, which is amazing. How is it working with him and under him and kind of like learning much? I mean, obviously learning a lot from him.
Yeah, it's like such a gift. It's really special to be around someone like him, especially in different environments, because I have a really unique sort of opportunity with him in that I'm in corporate spaces with him, doing the work that we do with Fortune 100 companies, so with leadership teams and scaling sort of mental skills coaching and cultural development with their companies. And so I get to see him in that space with that population, right? Executives who are really invested in changing the world. And then I get also to be supervised by him in the space of individual therapy. And so I get to see how his mind works as well there, and how he's able to sort of guide me through guiding others, exploring their potential. And so it's really unique in that I get to kind of capture that and also capture his entrepreneurial mind. And it's something, I don't want to like get too deep in it, but the field of psychology doesn't really talk about business, doesn't talk about being an entrepreneur, it doesn't talk about impact at scale. It's really designed for you to become a licensed provider and to see individual clients. And there's obviously the pandemic has really illuminated the mental health crisis, right? And it's exacerbated it in some ways. There's such a demand for these things to be a part of the way that we're taught and raised and socialized, not just for the elite few or for those that are at a place where they're completely broken and they have no other options. So it's so cool to kind of be a part of it with him and learn from him in those different aspects.
Well, and so kind of what does it look like exactly when you're working with some of these major corporations, like Microsoft, I think is one of them. So yeah, kind of what does that look like?
Yeah, we started with Microsoft pretty early in this shift between the old era and Satya Nadella taking over as CEO. And he was really invested in there being deep purpose and meaning in the work that they were doing there. Microsoft is a really interesting company because 25 years ago, they were like at the top of the game. And as it happens for some companies, and we can see this with sports organizations or athletes as well, when you're at the top, you can either continue to let it rip or you can start to play it safe. And especially when there's shareholders involved, and Microsoft started to play it safe, and then Apple came on board and these other companies came on board, right? And they no longer were at the top of their game anymore. And so there's a like changing of the guard. And we came in a couple months into that to help their leadership teams. And there have been a couple folks at Microsoft that are direct reports of Satya who've been huge ambassadors of ours. And so the work has really looked like working with those high-level C-suite executives who are responsible. Judson Althoff is one of those names. He's responsible for 4,000 people and multi-billion-dollar portfolio for Microsoft. And so the work that we've done has really been in helping them as leaders understand who they are as individuals, and the extension of that is how they lead others, and sort of overlaying individual mental skills and how that relates to the art and neuroscience of coaching or leadership. We can kind of use that interchangeably. And then building for scale. So what we did as a company is we created a digital course. It's really hard for Microsoft's 120,000 people globally, right? So there's like, 10 of us that are trying to change the world. So we built a digital course, both for Microsoft and then separately for our own consumers to help meet the demand for scale.
That's cool. I mean, it sounds all all extremely applicable to sports as well and athletes. So kind of like, who have you worked with? Or I know you're working with UCLA now, but you've obviously, delved a little bit into sports psychology too.
Yeah, I've worked with UCLA is the biggest program that I've worked with so far. Part of that is just kind of time demands. And I've worked with a couple other universities, have another one maybe on board that I'm taking. And I've worked with Olympic professional athletes, worked with a lot of youth sport athletes. Kind of not going to say names,
Yeah,
but
of course.
On public record is that I've worked with April and Alex, and it was super fun to see them thrive at the last Olympics. So yeah, it's been really fun. I've also worked with clinical populations, and so I've kind of been at the deep end of that as well, and it makes me really grateful for the folks that I get to work with in performance spaces. Just how fast change takes place, and how invested they are, and it's just really special.
Yeah. On the record, I've worked with her also. The start of my beach volleyball career professionally.
On the record, I've not worked with you, but I've played with you in the USA gym. So yeah,
lots of layers in this room.
Oh, I kind of wanted to go back to the digital course with Microsoft. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more, like what's on that course? So for people that are listening, what kind of comes with it?
Yeah, definitely. So the digital course is kind of more of a corporate square version of what our own course at Finding Mastery, and so it's built basically on 5 buckets, if we want to call it that. The first bucket is self-discovery. So that's really answering questions about who you are, what your strengths are, what your values are, how you define, we call it high performance, but success over time, sort of as the kind of North Star compass, right? If you're really clear on who you are, you don't get pushed around in different environments, or the pressure of what people think of you it doesn't waver your confidence, right? So theoretically speaking, you don't need sports psychology after that if you are really clear on that. So we start there because it's foundational. And then mindfulness is its own bucket. Mindfulness meditation as a training to strengthen the mind's attention system. That's really what it's about. It's not about levitating or enlightenment. It's really, can we do the bicep curls for our brain to strengthen our attention system? Because that really is the common denominator when we look at, for example, peak performance. You know this to be true, right? Your mind and your body are synced up. There is a complete sort of engagement and immersion in the present moment. And so when we're not performing well, we're thinking about what just went wrong or what could be going wrong in the future, right? And so at baseline, most of us struggle with just being where our feet are. And mindfulness meditation is one of the most effective ways to train our mind to just be present more often. So that's why it's kind of its own bucket. The other piece is if you don't have great awareness of your thoughts or your emotions, which are really the drivers of performance, then it's really hard to change, right? So when we look at how do you develop more confidence, if that comes from our self-talk, if you're not aware of your self-talk, then it's really hard. It's really hard. So we start there. So mindfulness is its own bucket. And then another bucket would be what we call mindset skills. So those are things like calm under pressure, confidence, focus and refocus, and then trust. And when we talk about trust, it's intrapersonal trust, how you trust yourself to do difficult things. And then the extension of that is really how we trust others in performance environments. And then psychological framework would be the next bucket. Those are things like grit, optimism, and internal locus of control. So when we talk about colloquially mental toughness, that's the kind of the stuff of mental toughness. And then a whole nother bucket is self-care, because it is really mismanaged in corporate environments. For us as athletes, it's sort of built in, right? You get your 8 to 9 hours of sleep, prehab, rehab, those things are built-in mechanisms. When I got into corporate spaces, most people would raise their hand to say, on average, they were getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep, and that they work out intermittently or on vacation in August for 2 weeks, and nutrition is just whatever they can get their hands on. And so it's really mismanaged. And when you're kind of pushing to those edges and then not taking care of yourself, it's a really quick path to burnout, which then is really hard to dig yourself out of. And it kind of becomes a vicious cycle in non-athletic environments.
That's literally
Am I
You
speaking
know,
to your
literally
life?
after Miami, like that's what it was for me. It was just like pushing myself, not taking care of myself, and then losing the joy of it,
Yeah.
and just trying to get myself back into it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to Gina about it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the joy is so important, whether it's just like the elation that we experience when we're really connected to passion, or it's just like being able to filter and sort of hold on to what's good through progression, right? When that's gone, it's really hard to be gritty and like stick it out. When we talk about grit as a skill, like passion, perseverance for long-term goals, most people think perseverance is what's harder, and it's really staying connected to passion, because time is so limited, but to be great at anything requires so much time, and we end up working at this like pace and this clip that's not sustainable, because then we don't prioritize self-care as a part of it. And so passion usually is the first thing to go, especially if there are always consequences that are on the line, because then anxiety sets in as well, and it becomes just like a
Like, are you
wet
living in my
blanket.
brain? That's
That's
literally.
why she's here.
I know.
You guys, you two know, both
Yep,
of you guys.
yep.
I literally just had a conversation with these guys over the weekend or earlier in the week.
Yeah.
It's crazy because, yeah, I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And, you know, a lot of people think that it's just athletes that go through it, and it's not. And it's, you know, this is something that I do for a living. It's something that I'm passionate about. And, yeah, I think people misunderstand that anyone can go through that and lose that joy or passion and lose that grit, because you just can't physically do it anymore. And then mentally I'm just stuck in my head, and I'm like, why am I doing this again?
Yeah, you're definitely not alone in that, you
Yeah.
know, and part of it is cultural too. And Dr. Mike is kind of notorious for saying this, but the model that we work from is we have to do more to be enough. And it's pretty backwards,
Yeah.
right? Because we end up sort of doing more as a shell of ourselves at some point, because it's not sustainable. And then we end up feeling also like a shell of ourselves and really disconnected to what matters most to us. So you're not alone in that, and it's not reserved for certain populations. We're all kind of susceptible to it or prone to it.
What about like with joy too? Kind of, I feel like I've read a lot about how there's a difference between happiness and joy too. So kind of how do you go about identifying it, or, you know, determining if something is more based on joy, which I think is typically what we want to search for, right?
I mean, they're both emotions.
Yeah.
Right. So technically they're both pretty fleeting. Emotions have a very short life. They're just a couple seconds. When we sort of relive them and rehearse them in our head is when we have sort of longer experiences with emotion, or they turn into mood states. I think there's a over index in our culture about happiness. You know, if like a lot of people say, I just want to be happy. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean you don't ever want to feel sadness, or you don't ever want to be angry? And what is that? Does it mean that those things are so uncomfortable to you that like you then avoid them, or you're designing your entire life around these like fleeting moments? The other piece is that sort of the path to happiness is through joy and gratitude, right? If you think about, again, the most fulfilling moments where you were thriving and you experienced joy, there was a quality about it where we were fully present. Like no parent with their little kid sort of recalls their most memorable moment with their kid while being on their phone sending an email for work, right? Like that's just not how joy works. Again, it's like, can we get our mind to be present? And so the path to happiness isn't really through doing more or having more. It's, can I really be connected in the present moment? Can I really sort of be connected enough to attune to the things around me that bring joy and bring happiness and fill me up with gratitude? Because in that, then we get to experience happiness. So it's not that they're like hugely different, but typically the path to happiness is through joy and gratitude and being able to really connect to that.
Are you willing to share maybe a story of like when you experienced joy or passion, and whether that's playing or currently right now in life?
I've done a lot of optimism training, which sort of foundationally starts as gratitude training. And so optimism is kind of a future-oriented lens, the belief that something good's about to happen. And one of the ways that we can train it is through gratitude. And this follows research. We don't have time to talk about it, so I'm not going to geek out. But it's really about being a researcher of good. So not sort of being reflective about what's good in your life. It's really like going out and looking for it in the moment as it's happening. So it's like the moments where, you know, you're driving through traffic and you see someone ahead of you that's had their blinker on forever, and then someone actually lets them in, right? And it's like, oh, that's really kind, you know, like recognizing like stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like, I literally in Seattle, a road was closed. There was a lot of construction. I was driving back when I was living there, and like this woman was like, you could tell she was like really nervous trying to get in, and someone stopped traffic for her to get in. And it's like having one quality of mind that you can actually like look for that. So the problem begins is that when we have a negative mood often, or we have a pessimistic lens, we will see that around us, versus when we look for things to be grateful for, look for random acts of kindness, look for good around us, then we'll see that as well. Right. So I've like really sort of, I dove into optimism training when I was on the national team because I was so fucking miserable for a period of time, right? And so I started to shift my lens. So I experience moments of joy often, but it's like the connectedness in those moments. And it's often when I see like a random act of kindness that I really feel that. Or when I'm like really in it with someone and like the needle just shifts a little bit, you know? So I had a client, for example, that is super high functioning, really critical, has been in some cool spaces academically, but like never really satisfied with himself. And we started training loving kindness meditation. And when we first started doing it, he was like really resistant to it. He's like kind of like, oh, this shit, I've done this before. And I was like, yeah, it's just like, you know, see what happens, what comes up for you. And I didn't want to push it too much. So I really relied on him to do the work in between sessions. And it's like completely shifted things for him, where he's like no longer so hyper focused on outcomes. And by outcomes, I mean like perfection, like getting 98%, you know, like, and when that was sort of in jeopardy, he would become really anxious and sort of miserable. And it like fundamentally shifted things for him, that he just like was showing up with like a more balanced energy and able to sort of flex as things flexed around him, and could create space. It's not that his expectations changed, but his ability to sort of navigate that when they were sort of at stake, or if something didn't go as planned, that he was just like, yeah, I'll figure it out, versus, oh my God, what am I going to do? And to see someone shift like that and experience joy while still pursuing excellence in the way that he is like when I experience joy as well, you know, because you're like, I'm really in it with people. And for a long time, it's like, shit, are we going anywhere? Like, am I doing it? Like, am I helping this person, you know? And when they come in and it's like flipped, it's like, oh man, this is really cool. So those are the moments now that I like experience the most joy.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
That's fascinating. But just having patience too, like working through that process, like it doesn't happen right away, I would imagine. So it's just staying patient with your clients and seeing the growth and really trusting the journey, which I'm sure you probably preach to your clients. Or what's your thought on like the process of the journey?
I think it's really important to meet people where they're at. And I think the journey for everyone is like something different, you know? And so I'm finding for me as a clinician, I am so change oriented that when I'm with clients where it doesn't really feel like change is happening, I get frustrated. And it's like, what am I actually looking for in this? And so for some clients, the journey is, can I actually just be where I'm at with myself, right? Because that in and of itself is therapeutic, right? Because we spend so much time, and this is how the brain is just built. Like, I like it, I don't like it, I want it, I don't want it. Like, this is good or this is bad, versus can I be with what is in this moment? And so sometimes that is the journey, is just learning to be with what is in the moment. And if we can tolerate that a little more, then we can get to progression in some direction, right? So that's a piece of it as well. The journey is, it's going to look different for everybody, and what's possible for everybody is a little bit different. Yeah, I mean, and I'm saying this contextually speaking. I've been with like very clinical populations, you know, like chronic and persistent mental illness and psychosis, and so the journey for them is a completely different conversation versus, you know, us in this room. It's different, right?
Yeah. Kind of going back to what we were saying before, is you've made a big impact on me when we were working together, and there's a couple of things that really have like stuck with me over the years. One of them is I think you touched base on it, was create space between stimulus and response. And that just like that quote, I like repeat it in my mind. And it's all about, like instead of being reactionary towards something, it's choosing how you want to respond, living in alignment with like your core values. And so I kind of want to ask a little bit about what like how someone can go about defining their core values and how important that is. And yeah, kind of just the principle about it.
There's a bunch of different ways to go about like defining your core values. We have a particular way of doing it, Finding Mastery, and we call it developing a personal philosophy statement, which is 25 words or less. What is it that you stand for, right? And we say 25 words or less. It's not really possible to kind of distill down everything that we value and stand for as human beings in like 25 words or less. But we want to be connected to it, first of all, as individuals. And then the extension of that is we're never in it alone. And so we want to be able to sort of articulate it to other people as well. So that's why 25 words or less. And we have a like particular way of doing it. There's lots of ways you can do it. You can go on viacharacter.org if you wanted, and sort of it'll tell you your top 5 values if you wanted to do that. Or you could just spend some time reflecting on like, who is it that has really influenced you in your life, and why did they have an influence? What was it about the way they were living, or who do you find yourself admiring, and what is it about them that you admire? What are the words and phrases that you use often? Because our language is an extension of our thoughts. And so when we look at values or principles, it's not like an Easter egg hunt where you want to like go find it. Like, oh, I need to find what I stand for or what my principles are. It's really about paying attention. And so the process of like self-discovery or self-reflection is really one of the ways to do it. So it can be as simple as journaling, what it is, what do I stand for? What do I value? What do I want to be about in moments of test? Because that's when it's hardest to kind of be aligned or to be responsive rather than reactionary. It's not when things are good or we're playing well or we're hitting our numbers or making a shit ton of money. It's like when I really feel challenged, that's the work. And so we want to be able in moments of challenge, one, to get our mind to be present enough so that we can connect to values-driven behavior, but then also be clear on what the values are, because in a world where we're increasingly interconnected and the model is very comparative, it's really easy to sort of shape shift to wanting to fit in the decisions that we're making in that moment, or be so driven by the anxiety of not being enough in that moment that we don't really know who we are. And so if we can get our mind to be present enough, and then we can be really clear on what the values are, then we get a choice, right? To respond rather than react. So it's really just about like sitting down and reflecting and doing the work. And you can kind of leverage whatever medium it is to help distill it down. But for anyone who wants to do it, I would say, get it down to a pithy statement so that it's really clear to you in these moments of test, and then test it, right? Because it's not meant to be something you tattoo on your forehead and it's like immovable. You want to test it out and kind of figure out like, is this working for me? Is this really like what I stand for in moments, or what I want to stand for? And lean on trusted others. Like, hey, this is what I'm standing for. This is what I want to be about. And I'm going to miss the mark often. So here's how you can help me course correct when I am missing the mark. And so that's really important too, is to get to a place where you can share it with others so that like they can help bring us along.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important because it's not just applicable on like the court for us as athletes, but as individuals as well. Like, I want to be empathetic. I want to be compassionate. I want to live with grit and, and passion. So I think it's really important. I feel like I did the exercise when I was working with you, and I feel like I need to do it again because I probably have changed a little bit over the years. But I know. Yeah,
I really wanted to ask this.
No, yeah. I was laying it up.
No, you're good. A little layup, a little love. Appreciate you, girl. So I kind of wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind sharing your philosophy, and then has it changed over time as well?
I don't mind. Wouldn't it be funny if I was like, I do mind?
It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Cute.
I've distilled it down to live and love curiously. But the like fuller phrase is live curiously, think wildly, risk wisely. I think live and love curiously feels kind of more to my core right now. The living piece, not like, I don't mean for it to sound trite, it's really about kind of like bringing my whole self to things. Because for a while I wasn't able to bring my whole self, or wasn't willing to bring my whole self to things. So that's really what live means when I say that. And then curiosity is really central for me in everything I do. I'm the best version of myself when I'm really connected to a sense of curiosity, like a beginner's mind, like an investment in learning and progression, and like a wholehearted, empathetic curiosity for other people, and what they're going through, and our own dynamic in that. And so for me, that's like kind of really what I've kind of centered on.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to, I guess, have your philosophy evolve or be where it is today? Because you're very clear on what your philosophy is. And for those that are listening that might not know what, or they don't have that clarity, how can they start, or how can you share that process?
It really is a process. It took me at least 2 years to get to that space, probably 2.5 years. I first did personal philosophy when I was on the national team, and it was the last couple of years of my career. And we did it as individuals in a group, knowing that we would be sharing it with our teammates. And so it sort of felt like a loaded environment, especially at the time as we were like shifting culture, and we're trying to figure out how to be vulnerable with each other. And so I wrote a personal philosophy that was more sort of performance oriented, that like kind of captured who I was as an athlete, or who I wanted people to kind of understand me as an athlete. And it really kind of missed the mark for who I am as a human being, where I take my heart always. And so when I retired, which was probably a year after we started this work, then I started to kind of go back to earlier kind of childhood experiences, and understanding how early relationships shaped me and shaped the way that I do things, the way that I think about things. And then I iterated even further as relationships became more central to me in my life. And so it was definitely like a multi-year process to get it to where it is now. And I often think, like, is this still right for me? You know, because there's a double-edged sword to curiosity, especially if you're outcome focused, that, you know, it can become almost like too curious, to the point of like curious to want to be right, or curious in a way that even if it's coming from a wholehearted place, can be misunderstood by other people as like having an agenda. Like I was asking questions of our former CEO once, just because I would love to spend a day with a barista at Starbucks, just to understand what their life is like, you know. So we were talking about app and data and and I was asking all these questions from a curious place, and he was just fucking do the work that I'm asking you to do. I was like, okay, well, my philosophy is, you know, I'm just being curious. So thank you. So there's a little bit of a double-edged sword to it, but yeah. And Courtney Thompson and I have talked about this quite a bit. She called me after she retired and was like, dude, I've been thinking about this, and I think it's this, you know. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I think you're getting there. I don't know, you know. And so I say that to level set that for some people they'll just have it, you know. There's like a word or a phrase that grandma or grandpa passed down, that's a part of their, you know, family culture, that really like cuts to the center of things for them. I would say 10% of people I work with are, like, have that, you know. When I'm like, hey, what do you stand for? It's just like, boom, like this is what my family stood for generations, and this is all what I'm about. For most people, it's like, I don't really know. This is harder than I thought it was going to be. And so I would encourage people, just like write, revisit it, test it. When you're most challenged, what's it like for you? Is it the compass, or is it kind of just a way, but not really the North Star? And keep distilling down to a place where it feels really good when you say it out loud. Because that's really what it's about. It's like, does it feel good when you say it out loud? Do you connect to it?
Can you say it one more time?
Live in love with curiosity.
I think I feel like this ties in a little bit into philosophy, core values, all of that, but like having purpose and meaning in life too is really important. And I feel like sometimes, you know, me myself, like I've gotten lost in it. Like, why am I doing this? Is this really what I want to do? And you recommended a book to me one time. It was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And it was like, that book changed my life. But I still find myself, you know, sometimes if things are tough, and, you know, how can someone go about finding their purpose or finding their meaning? Because I think it's more than just what you're doing. You know, I think there's a lot of deeper levels to that. So
that's a good question. Yeah, I think it's hard work, and I think in some ways this is my own opinion, we overvalue it, like knowing exactly what it is. So I'll put a pin in that and come back to it. But again, having your purpose, it's sometimes talked about as like this thing I need to go find. And I think that's where we get sort of confused on it. It's definitely future oriented. It's definitely something that you really care about, but also that like is deeply meaningful, right? And it's often about others too. It involves others. It's not just sort of egocentric, but I think we like find a purpose by being really attuned to like what lights us up in the present moment. And if we're so scattered or we're so used to like doing rather than being, it's really hard to like understand what gives you a sense of purpose. And that's kind of the nature of like how we live life right now, you know, like we're always distracted. And so it makes sense that most people have a hard time like understanding or connecting to what their purpose is. So I think the path to like understanding what your purpose is really through attunement to what fires you up. Like I've always wanted to be a doctor. I used to want to be a medical doctor. I retired from, I had no plans of being an Olympic athlete as well, but I kind of like fell into it. And then I retired and I was like, what do I do now? You know? And I knew like once I linked up with Dr. Mike and the work that we were doing in corporate space, I knew that like that was really fulfilling to me, kind of to see people's minds turn and to kind of feel like I was almost witnessing change, like being experienced in within an 8-hour day with people, and being able to like share my stories with others and be connected to others. But I was so resistant to going back to school and becoming a doctor and studying clinical psychology because I was so caught up in, well, I like this, but I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And if you're sort of shooting yourself all over the place, then it's really hard to be attuned. You know, like I was missing the mark the whole time of like, man, this really like lights me up. This like really fires me up. I really love learning. I really love being in it with people. So why don't I just do this? And I think that I'm not alone in that experience, you know, where we miss what kind of fires us up and gives us meaning in life, because of all of the constrictors that we place on our own experiences or that culture society tells us we should be doing. Kobe Bryant, I don't know if you have seen the clip of Kobe Bryant at USC talking about Dave Velasco asked him like talk to us about limiting mindsets, and he talked about this concept of like, you always have to protect your dreams. It's not about dreaming bigger, which is what you would think Kobe would say, right? It's like, you've got to like work harder than everybody else, dream bigger than everybody else. It's like, no, you got to protect your dreams, because the older you get, the more responsibilities and constrictors that get placed on your dreams. And so it's not about dreaming bigger or like doing more. It's really about like protecting what like is really kind of core to you and what you think is possible. And so I think that's kind of linked to purpose as well, right? Is like really protecting what's core to you and what kind of gives you meaning.
How do you protect?
That's a good question. I love the furrowed eyebrows too, because it's coming from like the most curious place.
Living out your personal philosophy over
here. Yeah. What gets in the way, right? It's often anxiety. It's often kind of what could go wrong if I do this, you know? And I think I want to acknowledge that I'm saying that from a very like privileged place, because we get to say what could go wrong if I do this. And I'm speaking like economically and financially, because we have wiggle room if it doesn't work out, that we can still kind of keep going, and not everybody can kind of have that conversation with themselves. And so, you know, there are constrictors for people that are real in terms of like finances. You know, not everyone can pursue the thing that they're most passionate about because it doesn't put food on the table or put a roof over your head. So I want to be delicate in the way that I'm saying this, but it's really about what stirs you up and gets in the way of kind of exploring what's possible. and what fires you up the most. And it's usually a limiting mindset, right? It's I should, or well, if I try this, this could go wrong, versus I'm going to try it. And when things don't go as planned, I'll figure out how to adjust, because this matters so much to me. And so I think it comes down to mindset or psychological skills.
Yeah. It's super easy to get caught in the, I should, which I find myself doing. So, yeah, I think it's all about just being your best now and whatever it is that, drives you. And I know you kind of touched base a little bit about retirement and like the things that you maybe went through. So kind of to get into what that transition was like, because, you were an athlete for most of your life. And then, kind of what things did you struggle with when you first, didn't have volleyball to identify with?
I mulled over retirement for a while. My body, my brain weren't like really cooperating with me, and I had a bunch of concussions, so I actually lost a lot of passion for the process. I used to love to get my ass kicked, and I didn't really love going into the gym anymore. And so for me, that was kind of the first piece of it, but I was still improving. I was still getting better as an athlete. I was performing really well towards the end. And so for me, that was always sort of the compass. As long as I feel like I'm getting better, I'm going to keep playing. But I was continuing to get better, but I didn't feel good from a physical and emotional, mental standpoint. So I really mulled over it for a while. And I remember writing the email to Karch and I was like, I'm cool. I'm good. Everything's good. And I sent the email. I just started sobbing, and it felt like such it was final, it really wasn't final. I could come out of retirement anytime, but it feels final. And I remember when I think about retirement, I think about just watching TV on the couch, kind of sending my resume out, trying to figure out what's next. Because at the time I was really convicted that I wasn't going to go back to school. And I also was really convicted that I've had this kick-ass dream job for the last 12 years, kind of gallivanting all over the world and living in different countries and getting paid to do it and representing our country. And so it was how could I possibly find another job that's fulfilling, even though I hated my job as a volleyball player on many days. How could I possibly find another job that's fulfilling? So it was let me just find a job where I can make money and so that it facilitates the things that I care about most. And I think I was pretty off in that being sort of the first thing that I was looking for. I think I was also really fortunate in that I'd started to do a lot of this work before I retired. So it wasn't this sort of existential crisis of shit, who am I? Because that's what a lot of athletes go through, right? Who am I now that I'm no longer an athlete? And I had started to kind of do that work and parse through who I was as a human being, and already starting to translate those skill sets and those values to something outside of sport. But I really wasn't connected to what was kind of meaningful for me. It was just let me find a job that makes good money so I could still connect to what's meaningful for me, traveling and having adventures and blah, blah, blah. And so it did take me a while to sort of connect to that.
Yeah. I think about it a lot because I know, volleyball is not going to be forever, and it's something that's kind of scary, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that I've learned now later in my career too, that I feel when I was first playing that I wish I would have known, that I wish I would have, taken advantage more of, but kind of what things do you wish you would have known? Going back to this question is when you were playing versus what you know now.
Everything. As I mentioned before, we don't teach kids what confidence is and what it means to be confident. We tell kids to be confident. We tell kids to be authentic. We tell kids fill in the blank, but we don't really teach them the mechanics of what that means. And I think we're doing a huge disservice in that. And so my model for being confident as an athlete was just to work harder and do more reps, which is fine at to a certain point, right? Because I could be better and perform well. But once you get to the national team and you're on the world stage at the pinnacle of the sport, not every rep's going to be good, right? I remember one time I was doing extra reps at the end of a 7-hour training, and I was supposed to do, I don't know, for an arbitrary number. I was supposed to do 100 passes, and the 100th pass I shanked. And I was like, give me one more. And Hugh walked by and he goes, no, you don't get one more. You don't get to do another one because you don't get a do-over at match point. And I was like, damn.
Shut you down.
You know what I mean? But he's right. And so for most of my career, like I needed that last rep to be good, right? For me to feel confident. And part of that was because I was so critical in the way that I talked to myself. And so knowing things like your confidence comes from your self-talk, not working harder than everybody else in the gym would have been really important for me. Or how to use my breath and how to use like mindfulness as a tool to get my mind to be kind of present, because for so long that was pretty easy for me. Like I felt pretty invincible in college, and I didn't feel that way when I got to the national team. And so it was much harder for me to be present while I was practicing and playing. And so there's some like kind of basic things as well as optimism, you know. I have joked with some of my corporate clients that I'm a recovering pessimist, you know, kind of like a recovering alcoholic or whatever, because I grew up with, you know, like a pretty pessimistic dad, and it is kind of conditioned. And so, and then, you know, when I got to the national team, there were a lot of sort of things in the environment that made it easy to see what was kind of not good around you. And so that makes it really hard to filter out and find joy when you're kind of pushing the edges every day and really exhausted. And so just how to kind of find joy when you're kind of in the pursuit of what's possible. And it's really in the moments that are hardest, like how can you find joy? And it really boils down to kind of how we're choosing to see things and our lens. So there's kind of just fundamental things that I wish we would teach kids from the get, you know?
Yeah, you mentioned self-talk, and I was curious, what's your self-talk process like now? And then has it proved over the years now that you're a sports coach from like player to coach? So what's that been like?
Yeah, my self-talk now is more balanced, right? Like I still have high expectations for myself. There have been certain situations that I've noticed sort of kind of the old, really like critical version of myself come through, which is like pretty natural. I feel really grateful that I've been doing this work. A lot of doctoral students like suffer with imposter syndrome, and I haven't felt that. Kind of by and large, like, you know, you feel it occasionally, but I just generally feel more balanced in the way that I talk to myself. I can make mistakes, and like the thought isn't, gosh, you're such a piece of shit, you know, like it's like, ooh, let me do that again. And it's kind of the lens is like more excitement on the other side of things. So generally my self-talk's more productive. It's more balanced.
How did you find balance? Or I think, excuse me, I would say finding balance is kind of hard for people to kind of explore. So
yeah, I think in the beginning when I started doing the work with self-talk, I was concerned that like if I was kinder to myself, that I would lose my edge. And so when it comes to self-talk, it's really about understanding the things that you say to yourself that break down confidence rather than build it up, and doing the work to find something that's more productive that you can say to yourself. And then being able to back that up. So I'm not talking about like positive affirmations. It's like really like, for me, a couple of the thoughts that work best are I can do difficult things or I can adjust, because I really wanted to and liked being perfect, or some idea in our mind of what perfect is, right? And when I wasn't there, I was very self-critical because it would drive me to do more reps to be perfect again. And now it's like, I have a clear understanding that things aren't going to go as planned most often. And so I rely on myself to be able to do difficult things when that happens, or to adjust when that happens, and to sort of flex and figure things out to generate confidence in those moments. So, you know, you can do mindfulness meditation and sort of become more familiar with the quality of your thoughts and the patterns of the quality of your thoughts, and work to just notice them and let go. That would be one way. Another way would be to actually like write down, these are the thoughts that, you know, maybe used to work for me and don't work anymore, or I like are limiting at some point, or just really like feel like they're cutting me down. And these are some more like productive thoughts that I can kind of back up, or that are credible, that make me feel more expansive, right? Because we all know sort of that constricting feeling of what it feels like to feel small when we're not confident. And so that's also a good indicator. What are the thoughts that make me feel like I'm taking up space in a room? Those are the thoughts that we want to go with more often.
Yeah, that's great info. I'm going to go back and listen to this podcast and take notes.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've only touched the surface of everything that we could, like the introductory chapter to all the knowledge that you have to share. But I think that we do need to wrap it up, and then Dana's got a couple closing questions for you.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the ending usually of these podcasts. I like to ask this question, which is, how do you take a bet on yourself, or how have you taken a bet on yourself?
Gosh, that's a hard question to put words to articulate. Like, I connect to the feeling of it, you know. For my doctoral program, I told you all that, like, I was really resistant to going back to school. In fact, I said explicitly out loud when I retired, I will never go back to school. And then I was like dipping my toe in different areas and resistant to clinical psychology. And so I was like, maybe I should do industrial organizational psychology. Maybe I should do sports psych. And I had a couple of friends that were doing their doctorates, and they were telling me very like specific things that they were learning in an applied setting. I was like, damn, I really want that. And so I, like, in a fervor, looked up doctoral programs that were starting in the fall. And this was in like June of that year. And I found a couple with rolling admissions, and I applied and I went for it. And so it wasn't like, can I do this? It's just like, no, I feel really connected to this. Fuck it, I'm gonna let it rip. And so when I think about betting on myself, it's like not knowing how I'm gonna do it, you know? It was the same with USC. Like Jarrett Elliott, who's at Texas, recruited me as a walk-on athlete. And I came down to LA on like an epic recruiting trip and came home. And my mom, as a single mom, had $30,000 saved for my education. I was like, Mom, I really want to do this. She's like, all right. And had no idea how I was going to pay for it. I mean, $30,000 buys like half a semester and a couple books and a lunch at USC, you know? So like, I had no idea. It's like, so when I think about betting on myself, it's like really being comfortable with the uncertainty of like what that bet is going to mean and just going for it.
The last piece here, I'm just going to open the floor to you. If there's anything on your heart or mind that you want to share with us here in the room or with our listeners, the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. I love the idea of this podcast. And especially, especially that it's female forward, because when we look at differences on how women bet on themselves versus how men bet on themselves, even just, you know, the data on who applies for a job based on what qualifications they think they have, women, you know, tend not to apply for a job if they don't think they're 100% qualified. And at the end of the day, it's like, what the fuck does that even mean to be 100% qualified for something, right? Whereas men will just let it rip, you know? And so I think just in terms of women, right, being able to bet on themselves, I think it's a pretty special sort of thing that you're illuminating and bringing kind of more words to. I think it's really important for us to lift each other up as women in this society, and sort of change what it means to bet on yourself and bet on each other, and also recognize that we really aren't in alone. And so the more that we can kind of uplift each other, and it's not through the way that men do it, it's really through being sort of familiar with what gets in your way of going for it, and that uncertainty and unknowns are inherent in it, and that, can you deal with that? So like address the barriers to really like tolerating uncertainty, because I think that's what's really hard for women when it comes to betting on ourselves, and just like breaking down doors in the process.
Ooh. Bang, bang.
Wow, this was an amazing podcast.
I know, this is awesome.
Thank you for joining us. It was great meeting you.
Thanks for having me.
This is the Bet on Her podcast.
Mama Gucci and cut.
Had to throw